So recently, Apple just made a list of the top 100 albums of all time. Of all the time ever made in the world, these are the top 100 albums. The way they presented this, instead of putting it all out at once, they did 10 albums a day for 10 days. So day 1 was 100 through 91, day 2, 90 to 81, so on and so forth, until the big day of 10 to 1. While I was also observing the albums that were being put out, I was also observing a lot of the reactions that was put out as well. Basically, even if you've never heard an album in your life, there's still some reaction elicited here that you can understand and I can talk about. For example, what is one of the most popular albums here? They actually had a pretty decent mix of a lot of stuff. Like the first 5 albums they have Hotel California, and then they follow it up immediately with Astroworld, and then immediately after that is Rage Against the Machine. They're trying to have a diverse list. The main issue with Apple doing this, their main platform for presenting this was Twitter. So you just had a bunch of people reacting to it. The days that were just anticipating. Every single album that was put on this list, you at least had 5 people saying, why wasn't this higher? Like, for example, like Confessions by Usher is 95. People saw that, they said, it should be higher. Why isn't this higher? I feel like a lot of people looking at this list did not understand how little 100 albums are in the grand scheme of music. Because there are some big snubs on here. Like huge snubs that people are talking about. But I'll get back to that. But every once in a while, some sort of music publication will make their own list of the best albums ever. They'll have something like albums of the year, albums of the decade, so on and so forth. But after that is albums of all time. All the time in the world, these are the best albums ever. I'm just gonna tell you right, I'm a sucker. Just someone saying, oh, these are the most objective albums ever. I fucking eat it up. Because I have a weird fixation with objectivity in art. And I'm not saying these lists are objective. They're clearly subjective, and you'll eventually see that. With something like Rolling Stone, they have the top 500 albums, 5 times the breathing room to make a list. And there's still snubs there. It's just interesting to me how they do these lists. Firstly, it's actually like a great way to find new music. What's an album I haven't heard to that is like objective, that's considered really high quality? Well, let me look at the list of the top 500 albums ever, because I clearly haven't listened to all of those. What's something new I should listen to? But with this list, there's a lot of diversity they tried to put in here for a top 100 list. It's not perfect, but they try. They have pop, they have dubstep, they have rap. I don't think they have any metal, but no, they have Master of Puppets. A weird thing I noticed though is like there's some oddly contemporary choices. Like for example, like Billie Eilish is 30. She just recently made the 30th greatest album ever. Who would have known? Who would have guessed? I haven't listened to it. It's strange to me just seeing her beside like Biggie Smalls, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Tribe Called Quest. It's crazy to see her beside all of these figures. Yeah, when you're doing a list of all the music ever made in time, some albums have clearly had more time to age than others. So when you put albums like Billie Eilish, it's kind of weird because the album was made 4 years ago to stand the test of time. And even then, it's hard to say with confidence, oh yeah, this is a classic and there's only 29 albums better than this. Again, I haven't listened to it. I'm going to assume Ready to Die is better than it. Listen, I'm gonna give my first hot take of the video. Ready to Die is better than Illmatic. Illmatic is a great album, but it's like, I love the theatrics and conceptualization of Biggie. Illmatic is basically a technically perfect album, but it's technically perfect. Nas is rapping perfectly, the production's perfect, but it's almost like there's not enough imperfections to make it human sometimes. I feel the same way about Mad Villainy, which by the way, that's the first big snub on this list. No Mad Villainy. You know, that album with The Mask and MF Doom, that's not on this list. They didn't have any repeats, so when you saw Lana Del Rey on this list, that was the only album she was gonna have. When you saw SZA on the list, that was the only album she was gonna have. When you saw Talking Heads, that was the only album they were gonna have. Same with Outkast, Aretha Franklin, Nas, The Clash, you know, all of these people. But you look through this and you say, okay, Billie Eilish is on this list, Beyonce's on this list, even people like Casey Musgraves and who else? Solange, Beyonce's sister's on this list. People were looking at it like, these are some wild choices. Oh, she's gonna be on the list. Her. Who's gonna be on the list? She is. And then people had that stinking feeling in their stomach. They said, oh god, she is gonna be on the list. And all we could hope for was that our favorite albums could just be higher than hers. Because we knew Apple was going to put her on the list. And then, day 9, the bombshell dropped. Number 20. Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, one of the most influential pop albums ever created. Number 19, The Chronic by Dr. Dre, one of the most influential hip-hop albums ever created. Number 18, 1989, Taylor's version. And then number 17 is What's Going On, which is arguably the greatest album ever made. Rolling Stone put it at 1 at their most recent list, but that's not the point. It's not just 1989, it's Taylor's version. This was an album that released last year. It's not even a year old and you're already calling it the 18th greatest album ever? Oh my god. I mean, what are we doing here? So technically, yeah, 1989 was made in 2014, but the fact that they specifically chose the version that was made last year, this just hasn't had time to age, let alone be the 18th greatest album ever made, better than almost everything ever made according to Apple Music. It's not surprising that a list like this would have a bias this strong. Okay, this is a bias. This is clearly a bias. Putting this album right beside some of the biggest albums ever, in my opinion, that is a bias. There's always been bias in these lists. Like, for example, Rolling Stone, when they made, before the 2020 version, they had a 2012 version and a 2003 version. And I'm just gonna give you the top 5 albums of all time on the Rolling Stone list. Just the top 5. Number 5 was Rubber Soul by the Beatles. Number 4, Highway 61 Revisited by Bob Dylan. Number 3, Revolver by the Beatles. Number 2, Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, again, one of the most influential albums practically ever. And number 1 was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts. Another Beatles album? The top 5 albums, 3 of them are the Beatles? Are they really that overpowered? By the way, Sgt. Pepper isn't on this list, which is actually kind of crazy, but you know what? I like Revolver more, and that's on this list, so. But besides Taylor Swift, another bombshell dropped this day. Number 12, OK Computer by Radiohead. Wait a minute, Radiohead was already on this list. You're telling me we can have repeats? All of the artists we've seen before can have another spot. Is Taylor gonna get another spot? She didn't, by the way. Here's the top 10 albums of all the time ever made in the world, according to Apple Music. So number 10, Lemonade by Beyonce. I haven't listened to it. Number 9, Nevermind by Nirvana. Who hasn't listened to it? Even I've listened to it. Number 8, oh my god, I can't speak. Number 8, Back to Black by Amy Winehouse. Haven't listened to it. Number 7, Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick Lamar, specifically the deluxe version for some reason. I like it when it ends on Compton. Number 6, Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder, and personally my top 1 pick. Number 5, Blonde by Frank Ocean. It's okay. Number 4, Purple Rain by Prince and the Revolution. The sex song is really weird, but it is a perfect album. Darling Nikki I hate Darling Nikki like a lot, but it is a perfect album. Number 3, Abbey Road by the Beatles, one of the most overrated albums ever, and it's simply because of the track listing, and also why did that metal song cut off at the end? Oh wow, it's an artistic choice. You fucked up D'Angelo's album. Fuck. Number 2, Thriller, Michael Jackson. So what's number 1? What's number 1? It's not MJ, apparently. Well, number 1 is The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill by Lauryn Hill. I've listened to the album. It sounds important. I can only remember that thing. And X Factor. I'm sorry, I've listened to that album 3 times. I still can only remember 2 songs. I apologize. Like, when I listen to it, it sounds important. That's all I can say. Even then, there was people looking at this list, and anyways, like, people still found a way to complain. Oh wait, MJ was only number 2? He should be number 1. People were saying this, by the way, because I think people actually have reasons for Apple being suspect at putting Lauryn Hill at number 1. Because, by the way, Lauryn Hill hasn't made an album since The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, which was made in 1998. This is gonna be 26 years of no second album by Lauryn Hill except that Into the Unplugged. As of recently, she's hinted at making a new album, which in Lauryn Hill time, that's probably going to be like 5 years from now, but she's at least hinted at it, which is more than what we can say for the last 25 years. Some people are suspecting Apple might be giving her a little bit of praise. Hey, can we have an Apple exclusive, please? Hey, Lauryn Hill, can we have an Apple exclusive? You have the best album ever made, wink wink. We're gonna have dinner with you. They went up to her, they gave her a trophy, they said, you made the best album ever. I'm just gonna say, you can't do that with Michael Jackson. You can't talk to him. They weren't able to give him a big trophy and have dinner with him and talk about new album negotiations potentially. People had reason to just be a little disappointed, or be skeptical at the least. Then there's the big snub. The biggest snub of all snubs. There can be personal picks you believe that were taken out of this top 100, but there's an album that should be objectively on this list. Like, objectively, it should be on this list, and it's not. I'm talking about To Pimp a Butterfly. Go to any music publication, go to any top album of the decade list, go to any of those, go to rateyourmusic.com, which is basically like, it's basically IMDb for music, but for like really pretentious music people. How many awards did it win? How many Grammys did it win? Like, seriously, that album should be on this list. I'm serious, it's an album of the century. I just want to put into perspective how well received To Pimp a Butterfly is. This is a website called Album of the Year. This is Rate Your Music. These are pretty notorious websites in terms that they're rather snooty people. Like, look, this is just some random guy and he made this entire review. Like, oh my god. If I just go to this album, it says it's 425 overall. So if I go on this list and I try to look for the top 1 album ever made, just go to number 1, straight to number 1. It's To Pimp a Butterfly. And there's also, you know, actually all of these are snubs on Apple Music too, but number 1's To Pimp a Butterfly. And the same thing, if I go to this website, Album of the Year, and I say, you know, give me all the albums ever made ever and give me the user score. Again, it's To Pimp a Butterfly. This is the most highly rated album practically ever, according to, like, the point is that To Pimp a Butterfly is number 1 and it wasn't on Apple Music. What's that all about? Hey, Apple Music, what are you doing now? And there's an irony here that's actually kind of funny but disappointing regardless. So To Pimp a Butterfly won, I don't even know how many Grammys, but it lost Album of the Year. And guess what it lost Album of the Year to? 1989. Look at the album cover. Even if you've never listened to this album, look at the album cover. Look how much more interesting it is than 1989. Why is that not on the list? I don't know. Since I'm here, I might as well give some suggestions of what I wanted on this top 100 list, what I think would have been good choices. They're not going to be very recent choices, I apologize, but some more objective ones. Black Saint and the Sinner Lady. Like, for a jazz album, I kind of like that jazz album more than Love Supreme. That's such a crazy album to listen to. Go listen to it. Now, you might think I might say The Doors because they used to be my favorite band in high school, but I'm gonna say Forever Changes by Love should be on this list because it's a more paranoid, socially conscious masterpiece. Go listen to that one too. Stevie Wonder had 2 slots on this pick. I think he could have had 1 more with Talking Book. I'm gonna be a little greedy here. I'm gonna say Sound of Silver by LCD Sound System. They had My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy on this list. I would have liked College Dropout. I understand why they didn't put it on here, but I would have liked it. I think a lot of those albums are already top 100 albums on some other publication somewhere. Those aren't really crazy picks. Let me choose a really disgusting pick. Not that I think should be on this list, but what would be awesome on this list, in my opinion. I'm looking at my Spotify and I'm scrolling through my Spotify. What about Bizarre Ride to the Far Side? Yeah, maybe even Lab Cap in California. I'm not gonna go that far. I have some reactions pulled up here. I want to show you some reactions I pulled up. I love how this list exposed how dumb people are. This was basically a litmus test for people who are smart versus people who are dumb. I'm not calling myself smart, I'm calling these people dumb, okay? For example, I have this one tweet where Blonde was ranked the, 5th best album ever. I never listened to this album ever in life. Rigged selection. I love that way of thinking. I have never listened to this album in my life, therefore it shouldn't be on this list. And I'm trying not to have that same way of thinking about 1989 because I haven't listened to that album book. It's funny when he says it. Some guy's reaction to this list was making his own list of his own top 100 albums, and he put Jack Stauber at 98, and that's about when I stopped looking at it. So this one's about Stevie Wonder. Who is this? I have never heard of him. As a longtime Apple Music subscriber, I'm really disappointed that Megan Thee Stallion wasn't included in this list, but instead a bunch of unknown albums were listed. This is so biased. How many monthly listeners does Stevie Wonder have on Spotify? Yeah, he only has 20 million. Jeez, only 20 million on Spotify. And he hasn't made an album since 2005. What an unknown. I'll put another hot take here. Thriller was number 2. I like Off the Wall more. Another hot take. Prince they had Sign of the Times at like 51, I think. I like 1999 more. I'm upsetting people for no reason right now. Like, oh my god, I still need to listen to 1989 though. I'm gonna go above and beyond. 5,000 likes in this video. I will listen to every single Taylor Swift album and I will give my thoughts on each and every one of them in a video. One big video, I talk about every Taylor Swift album and I give my thoughts accordingly. I will listen to all of them because I haven't listened to a single one. If this gets 5,000 likes, it has to get 5,000 though. There's actually an effective use for like begging. Wow, apparently you can actually use this for feedback. Aja 73 by Steely Dan. True, that is a top 100 album, and that is their best album. Basically, form your own musical opinion about things, but at the same time, it's so much easier to say albums you haven't listened to than albums you have. Like starting with Body to Talk by Robin. For some reason, she just started existing at the end of the decade for me. For some reason, everybody was saying, oh yeah, what is the song? Dancing by Myself? That was the best song of the decade. You didn't hear her? No one ever talked about it until that decade list, and now, like, for some reason, she's on this list now. Like, I haven't listened to Body Talk. I haven't listened to Hotel California. California. I haven't listened to Rage Against the Machine, Pure Heroin, Confessions Untrue. I haven't listened to Flower Boy, Listen Without Prejudice, Back in Black, I had The Fame Monster. I haven't listened to any song ever. When you actually realize how little you've actually listened to these albums, it makes me feel like an idiot. You're telling me I've never listened to Doggy Style by Snoop Dogg? I listen to so much music and there's just too much. I just listened to a new album today and now there's like 30 more albums I haven't listened to that people are gonna judge me for. 5,000 likes. I'll listen to all the Taylor Swift albums. What do you think about this list? Do you even care? You probably shouldn't, but I care too much. I care way too much about these things. It gets into my head so easily. An opinionated list about music. Oh, don't mind if I do. If you don't listen to music, go listen to some. You know what? Thriller's a great album to start off of. Go listen to Thriller, actually. Listen to Off the Wall, actually.